I want to talk about the verse, the 5th verse that's in Chaitanya Charitamrita. Just the first 2 lines of it. Because if you get this verse, then you get like a real solid idea of who Radharani is. There's kind of an idea that Radharani is like somebody that hangs around with Krishna, or is one of the people that Krishna is with, or is his girlfriend or his wife or something like that. And although that's kind of true, all of those statements are true on the surface, but they're sort of missing the deeper truth about who Radharani is. So there's this verse, the 5th verse in Adi Lila of Chaitanya Charitamrita. It says, Rādhā-kṛṣṇa-praṇaya vikṛti lahadini shakti-rasmat ekādmana vapi-bhuvi pura deha-bedam gato. Radha is Krishna's pranaya. Radharani is Krishna's love. When Krishna's love activates, then that's Radharani. So you can't say that Radharani is somebody else besides Krishna. Radharani is Krishna's love. And then what does that love do? It's ladini. Love causes bliss. Love causes happiness. Love is the cause of happiness. Ladini Shakti Asmat. She's the Shakti of Ladini. She's the Shakti of bliss, which is the whole point of existence. The whole point of existence is to be happy. So Radharani is the whole point of existence. She's not just somebody that you could put next to Krishna on an altar if you want to. She's not just somebody that some Goswamis write about. She's the whole point of existence. She's the bliss that's within the blissful. Rādhā-kṛṣṇa-praṇaya vikṛti. Krishna's pranaya, Krishna's love, is Radha. Then the second line is so important. Ekātmanav. Ekātma. Deha-beda. Right? Ekātma, deha-beda. They're one individual. They're one identity. Prabhupada's word for word, it's ekātmana, means both the same in identity. Atma actually means identity. So they're ekātma. They're one individual. They're one being. Radha, Krishna are one being. Because Radharani is Krishna's love. How can you say that Krishna's love is a different being from Krishna? How can you say that sunshine is a different entity from the sun? It's not a different entity from the sun, but it's a facet of the sun. Sunshine is a distinct facet of the sun. Right? So love is a distinct facet of a person. So Radharani is a distinct facet of Krishna, but she's not a different being. Eka Atmana. She's one Atma with Krishna, but deha-bed gato. But they become two forms. They take two forms. There's one identity in two forms. That's Radha and Krishna. When you say the word Krishna, what are you talking about? What is the nami of the nam? What is being named when you say the word Krishna? What's being indicated by the word Krishna is a tattva, which is jnana and advaya. So tattva means reality. When you say the word Krishna, you're talking about reality. The reality which is advaya, which is not different or divorced or separated from anything that exists. The entity who's the root of all other entities. The advaya. The one entity in whom everything is. You are also consciousness. So if you want to come to know what Krishna is like, you can start by trying to really get a clear idea of what you are like. So it's not as easy as it sounds, but if you can carefully introspect into who you are and what you really want, then you can start to understand who Krishna is. So what do you want? If you know yourself, you'll start to understand God, because God is just like you. Your consciousness, God is consciousness. So tat tvam asi. You know yourself, then you'll know that Supreme. So what do you want? What do you really want? Not what you need, or not what you practically, require, but what do you really want? And why do you want the thing that you want? What's the deeper want? And what's the deeper want to that? And when you get down to the deepest thing that everybody wants, it's happiness. Everybody wants happiness. What causes happiness? Everybody wants Rādhārānī, happiness. Now what causes happiness? Praṇaya. Love causes happiness. The root of what's going on to everything in the world is that simply that consciousness wants something to be conscious of. Consciousness wants an object. And so we're looking for the most beautiful object, for the most suitable object that can give us happiness. That's the root of all the activity in this world or any world. Now, that principle exists originally in this original consciousness, Krishna. So that Krishna, he has some kama. So kamayata bahus syam prajayata. Because he had some kama, he has this desire. That's why he manifests many, many different distinct individual consciousnesses. Because he wants an object to be conscious of. That's Rādhārānī. Rādhārānī is the beauty within Krishna that Krishna wants to. Krishna is a consciousness. He wants something to be conscious of. You don't just want anything to be conscious of. You don't just want some blank wall. You want a wall with a nice picture on it. You want things that are beautiful, lovely, lovable. Right? So consciousness doesn't just want some light, some flash of light to be conscious of. Consciousness wants some beautiful object, some lovable object, some amazing object. And what is that original object of consciousness? It's Rādhārānī. So Krishna and Rādhārānī, they're absolutely one. Because there can never be Krishna without his object of consciousness. There can never be consciousness without the object. It would never be manifest. Rādhārānī is that object which gives Krishna pleasure. Rādhārānī. The love within Krishna that takes its deha bheda, that takes a separate form so that Krishna can experience it and gain Rādhārānī, gain pleasure, gain happiness. Do you understand so far? You understand what I'm saying?
Yes.
Do you have any questions about it?
I have a question.
Yeah. So you're saying that Rādhārānī is the most attractive object. So naturally, we would surrender to her. But some devotees don't naturally feel that specific attraction to Rādhārānī. They may feel that attraction to some expansion of Rādhārānī, like Subal, the Gopa, the cowherd boy, or something like that. Or to some other gopi, perhaps another gopi who has another name that we won't mention. But in our lineage, our parampara, our sampradaya, all of the time we're being directed towards Rādhārānī. So how come some devotees can feel some other feeling? They always get critiqued for feeling that way. So can there be some justification for it? Just give you a disclaimer, which you probably already know. I'm just answering you. This is Vraja Kishor Uvacha. That's all. But I kind of Vraja Kishor Uvacha is because of what Vraja Kishor studied. So, and because of what blessings Vraja Kishor got. So you can take this with a grain of salt. But I think that it goes without saying that I'm just telling you whatever I understand and whatever makes sense to me. First, I would question the assumption that everybody in our sampradaya is specifically, Rādhārānī Dasi. What about all the other, I don't know, look in the Cc and look at all the branches of the tree of Mahaprabhu. they're not all gopi swarup branches. There's lots of other branches in there. There's lots of, I think I'm not too read up on this, but I think especially in Nityananda's branch, there's a lot of gopa-bhava. That's certainly not our sampradaya. That's certainly our sampradaya. So first I would question whether or not it's really, really, really true that, everybody is in our history is always a Radharani Bhakta, and so if you're not, you're really a weird person. First I would question that. And second of all, I would say that most devotees don't even really know who they're attracted to or what they're attracted to. They don't, it's not like they actually have a deep experience that, wow, I really aspire to be a cowherd boy. It's just a vague thing for most people, and it's just based on some predilections from this life. So it's probably making too much of a big deal out of it anyway, to get into an argument with them about it, or to even, discuss it too much with them, because it's probably not as much of a big deal as such a discussion would make it seem. Like you may be like, yeah, when I get to Illinois, I'm going to go right to that pizza shop and I'm going to get that pizza as soon as I get to Illinois. And then, you finally get to Illinois and you're like, yeah, where's that pizza shop? And then all of a sudden you see like this guitar store as soon as you get off the plane. And then all of a sudden, even though you were really planning on going to this pizza shop, this guitar store caught your eye, and then you wind up in the guitar shop first. So same way, like, you might be thinking like, yeah, I really want to be a gopa, I really want to be a cowherd boy, I want to wrestle with Krishna, blah, blah. But, you just have not have any existential experience on the transcendental platform. So who knows what's going to happen when you get that first actual transcendental experience? When you actually get to Illinois, what are you going to see that's going to catch your eye? So I think that to a large extent, such discussions are irrelevant, or at least we over inflate their importance. But now to come to let's just take the question to the point of, what if you really are attracted to becoming a cowherd boy? What if you really want to help Krishna play? So that's what is the problem? Why should that be critiqued? Well, I mean, whose business is it anyway? Why should you even care who can critique it or not? Whose business is it except yours? And maybe like, what's your problem for sharing it so much and like being so concerned what other people think about it? Whose business is it? It's your business. And second of all, what kind of critique are you going to levy? I mean, Rupa Goswami himself, why wasn't one of Rupa Goswami's family members? There was 3 of them, right? Or something. I might be getting this wrong, but one of them was a Ram Bhakta or something like that. Isn't that true? The youngest brother was Anupam, and they tried really hard to change his mind and make him see what they saw about Krishna and Radharani. Could they? They couldn't. That's Rupa Goswami and Sanatana Goswami. They couldn't, so what is the point of like trying to argue with somebody about what they really feel for the divine? It's none of our business. However, if you feel gopa-bhava, sakya-bhava, that's awesome. If it wasn't awesome, then why would Rupa Goswami write about it? In Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu, he takes the trouble to explain all 5 rasa. He explains all 5 sthāyi bhavas and all 5 of the ways that they develop into all 5 rasas. So if each one of them wasn't beautiful and glorious, then why would he take the trouble? Furthermore, also, when you really realize the subject, at least a little bit more than at the ultimately elementary level, when you get to at least 2nd grade, you start to learn that all the gopas are expansions of the gopis. Everything, Rādhārānī is Purna Shakti. She's the object of Krishna's pleasure, right? Everything else which is experienced by Krishna is a facet or expansion from her. So what's the problem of gopas? They're awesome. They're the gopis in another form. So what's this big deal that that's something totally different? The gopi-bhava is something totally different. It's not totally different. It's the it's the same principle of the gopis, but now it's playing with Krishna in a different way. All right. What else? I heard that you guys like to ask a lot of questions.
I have 2 questions, and Justin also has a question.
Okay, so how do you reconcile the fact that Radharani is super compassionate, but at the same time it's extremely difficult and rare to attain what she has to give you? The problem is not that there's a lack of compassion or a lack of mercy. The problem is us. We're not accepting it. You can see this sometimes even with people in mundane ways, in regular ways. You can see sometimes people are so messed up that even when you are going out of your way to give them, actively give them something that they need, say somebody needs money and you're actively trying to give them money, but that person just has to do something simple like give you their bank account number or something like that, or come to your house or something. Sometimes people are so messed up that they can't even make that little effort required to just to get your mercy. That's us. And then if you ask, why is it that that person is so messed up that they won't just accept my gift? All they have to do is come to my house and get the money from my hand. Why won't they come get it? If you ask that and you think about it carefully, it's because they're actually attached to their miserable situation. You see that a lot with people that are attached to drugs, or people that are attached to certain kinds of depression that are very addictive. It's very difficult to get out of those kind of depressing or hallucinogenic situations because you become accustomed to them and you become fearful of what it would be like not to have it. So we're extremely accustomed to our ahankara, to our sense of identity, being something divorced from a central sense of identity of Paramatma. We're so attached to that we really don't want any mercy, which would destroy that. And that is the problem. So the difficulty in attaining Vraja-prema is not a lack of anything in Vraja-prema. It's not a lack of compassion or availability or magnanimity. It's a lack of us. It's a lack of our interest. It's a lack of our wanting it. And then you see people all the time, they say, no, I want this, I want that, I want this, but then they don't really want that. When you really want something, you get it. That's the problem. That's why it takes that's why it can be described as being a very difficult, strenuous process to get Vraja-prema. Because the ahankar has to be completely washed away. The ego, the false ego, has to be completely gone before you could accept that situation which exists in Braj Dham. Before you could embrace and insert yourself wholly and fully, unabashedly, into that amazingly, wildly, primally blissful situation. You have to be completely without holding on to any other attachment to some other concept of yourself, which has some dignity, or has some special position, or has some rights, or has some command over others. You cannot enter into that Braj Leela while you're still holding on in any molecular sense to that ahankar. So Radharani's compassion is constantly there, constantly enormously there, but the problem is our receptivity to it.
So the question was, how did you make the advaya-jñāna and Krishna being consciousness? What was I didn't fully catch that.
Oh, in the statement advaya-jñāna, where is the idea of consciousness and how is it connected with Krishna? That's what you're saying? That's what you're asking?
Yes, that's what I'm...
Okay, the word gyan means consciousness. But you may think, wait a minute, Gyan means knowledge. But knowledge can be either as an object or as a subject. So for example, if you look at a Rubik's Cube, right? So then there's Gyan of an object. You see that it has 6 sides and so many different colors. So that's Jnana as an object. It's knowledge. And the word knowledge is a good translation of Jnana in that sense, when Jnana is an object. But Jnana also can be a subject. If Jnana is the subject, then it's the entity who's looking at the Rubik's Cube and knowing it. It's the knower. So the word Gyan is a word for consciousness, because it refers to the knower. So this is how Jiva Goswami explains the verse, Vedanti tat tattva vidas tattvam yajnanam advayam. That consciousness is advaya. It's a consciousness which is related intimately to everything which exists. There's nothing that is separate from it. Advaya, there's no dvaita, there's no separateness from this consciousness, which is the tattva, which is the true reality. That is the subject of the Bhagavatam, that tattva. And the subject of Bhagavatam is Ashraya, which is Krishna. So that consciousness, which is the root of all consciousness, which is the root of everything, which is Advaya, is the person that's being indicated in the first verse of the Bhagavatam with the first words, Janma Dhyasya. And this conception of Krishna is universal to any kind of Vedic school. Like, this conception is universal whether you're Upanishad Brahmavadi, or if you're a yogi, or if you're a bhakta. It's a universal understanding of tattva, or God. But different schools would have a different elaboration on it, of what exactly does it mean. And then the Bhagavat school is the most inclusive elaboration on what it means, because we include what it means as Brahman, we include what it means as Paramatma, and we include what it means as Bhagavan. So how's that? Is that a sufficient answer for that question?
So you're saying Gyan here refers to like the subject, and Advaya means everything. So that consciousness, which is the subject of everything, that is Krishna.
That consciousness, which is everything. That's what Advaya again means. There's no other reality but consciousness. And then everything else, for example, the ahankar, and then whatever comes next, the manas, the buddhi, and all the dravya, all the elements and all that stuff, all of that is just something that's within consciousness. So everything in the world is inside consciousness. And consciousness is the thing which always exists and which is causeless. It's an existence which is self-causing. So that consciousness is the subject of all the Veda, Upanishads, Puranas, everything. And we understand that consciousness is Krishna. The ultimate, original, primal form of that consciousness is Krishna. But it can also be known as any Bhagwan or Paramatma or Brahman. Other people would know it in that way.
So your description of Krishna and Radha was it beautifully illustrated the Chinta Veda Veda Tattva. And in the beginning, it seems like the Veda aspect is more accentuated.
So there's oneness and there's difference. And in the beginning, we, really stress hardly on the difference between us and God and not God. But when does the oneness element come in? Because obviously the oneness element is super important. Well, one thing that you have to do is understand the importance of time and place and circumstance. And depending on who you're talking to, the answer would be different. If you're talking to a hippie that really thinks, hey man, we're all God, and takes that literally to an unhealthy extreme, then you probably would never want to stress on the oneness. until you get him out of that, worldview to something that's, you know what I'm saying? It has to come to be a balance. So you have to judge on the starting point. The way that you push on the balance to set it, to make it level, depends on what its original condition is. If it's like this, if the balance is high on the right side, you push down on the right side to make it level. If the balance is high on the left side, you push down on the left side. So if you're speaking to somebody that's, overly stressing oneness, then you're going to push down on the difference between self and God. But if you're talking to somebody that's overly dualistic and stressing the difference between everything, then you got to push on the oneness side. But, again, I think you just have to first read Prabhupada's books carefully and remember that Prabhupada's books are based on the Sanskrit that he took the trouble to put in. Most writers don't. He took the trouble to put the Sanskrit in letters we can easily read and give us word-for-word translations of every single word, and then give us translation and then explain the thing in a purport. So if you're just reading purports and, keeping a notebook full of quotes that you really like, you're not really reading Prabhupada's books. You're reading half of them. You got to read the translations, the word for word, the Sanskrit. You got to read the whole thing so that you get your context right. Otherwise, you're going to be pulling quotes out of the purport that are out of context and make no sense. So first of all, read Prabhupada's books carefully, systematically, aware of the fact that they're translations of originals. So pay attention to the original material, please. Prabhupada's purports are explaining the original material. He's not riffing on some new Grateful Dead theme. He's just explaining the original material. So pay attention to the original material and then understand Prabhupada's purport, what he's talking about. Then after you've done that, you want to follow Prabhupada's directions, which are to study further in the Sandarbhas. Study Jiva Goswami's explanation of the Bhagavatam. And study the other Goswami literature, which is explained the Bhagavatam, such as the Brihad Bhagavatamrita, and even the Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu is extremely important, and it's also an explanation of the rasa of the Bhagavatam. So first get your foundation by reading the essential Prabhupada books, the Bhagavatam, the Bhagavad Gita, the Chaitanya Charitamrita, and the Nectar of Devotion. And then get to your studies, man. Study the Bhakti Sandarbhas. Study all the Sandarbhas, the Bhagavad Sandarbhas. Study the Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu. Study the Brihad Bhagavatamrita. If you study even in the Tattva Sandarbha, you'll see that the oneness between God and self is quite important. Because first of all, you can't even really get to know a person unless you have something in common with them. That's a really important point. Actually, we feel love. If you're going to go out and fall in love with somebody, most likely it's going to be a human being. Most likely you're not going to fall in love with an insect. Reason is, you don't have anything really in common with an insect. An insect has all weird eyes, ugly, weird, strange body, tons of legs. Weird looking stuff doesn't look anything like you. You can't relate to it at all. You might fall in love with the dog more. Because a dog has, eyes, you can relate, has kind of a nose and a face. You can relate. There's more similarity between you and a dog, or me and a dog. So, you might fall in love with a monkey. It might even be easier. You could have an even more, significant relationship with a monkey because they're even a lot more like you. But most likely, if you're really going to fall in love with somebody and have a deep relationship, it's going to be a human being. You have to have stuff in common if you want to build a relationship. So if you're just stressing on the distinction between the self and God, how are you going to make a deep relationship? So it's very, very important to understand the sameness. I am consciousness. He is consciousness. Not only that, he is the root of my consciousness. He is the ground from which my consciousness sprouts. He is the sun from which my consciousness emanates as a light. There could be no person more intimate. There could be no person with more commonality to us than he. Understanding that gives rise to great love. That's why the Vedas stress these things.
Okay, so I've heard devotees say two things. Sometimes.
No, that's okay. So the question is, some people say the more you make advancement, the more Māyā ups the ante and challenges you. Other people say the more you make advancement, the more Krishna protects you. So, which is it? Is there any scriptural evidence to support either claim? Basically what happens is, it goes back to this question about Radharani's compassion. The problem is not in Māyā. The problem is not in Krishna. The problem is in me. Māyā is not actively trying to do anything to me. And neither is Krishna singling me out in any way, positively or negatively. You know? The question of whether or not I'm going to become Krishna conscious is a question of whether or not I'm going to become Krishna conscious. It's not a question of whether or not Māyā is going to let me slide, or Krishna is going to pick me up by my secret Sika. It's a question of whether or not I'm going to do it or not. So the answer, therefore, is the more you make advancement in Krishna consciousness, the easier it becomes, because the more you want to make advancement. So therefore, you don't see any scriptural support for the idea that it consistently becomes more difficult to advance as you advance. In fact, quite the opposite. The more you advance, the simpler it becomes to advance, and the more quickly you advance. So, you know, in the beginning, you'll spend an infinite number of lifetimes trying to get some shraddha in the concept of bhakti. Some sense that, well, your bhakti, love is better than sense gratification. You know, selflessness is better than selfishness. It would take you billions of births to get that advancement. That's extremely difficult to get. You can even, it's even said, Brahmanda Brahmite Kon Bhagwan Jeev Guru Krishna Prasade by Bhakti Lata Bij. That Bhakti Lata Bij is Shraddha, and you have to go all over the universe to get it. It takes forever. You know, but then after you get the Shraddha, relatively soon you come to Sadhu Sangha. After you get some interest in that Bhakti is good, it's better than the other stuff that I'm interested in, then pretty soon you wind up looking for Bhaktas. And then once you're in the Bhakta Sangha, then pretty soon you start to try to do what they're doing, which is bhajan. So pretty soon after you get Sangha, you advance to be a bhajan person, a bhajan kriyaka, I guess you could say a bhajan kriyaka. It doesn't take long, you know. And then once you start to try to practice what the sadhus do, again, it doesn't take long. You quickly become purified. But now we're talking quickly in terms of, you know, billions of lifetimes versus a couple of dozen lifetimes. So that now you're coming down to the scope now. Once you've started to do bhajan, you're coming to the scope where it's just a few more lifetimes. And then in the beginning stages, they're very difficult. There's a lot of really troublesome things to deal with in the beginning stages of bhajan. That's why it's called anishta. It's difficult to keep it steady. There's a lot of difficult things. First, you know, you do have the shraddha that bhakti is good, but it's not developed enough to be stronger than the shraddha that you have that sense gratification or selfishness is good. So when they compete, bhakti tends to lose. So it takes some time for that shraddha to get experiences that, wow, bhakti is really desirable and pleasant and pleasurable. So it takes some time for the shraddhas to equalize. And then when they do equalize, you can become steady. You know, so actually it takes a really long time to get out of anishta bhajan kriya. It's very difficult. And there's you know, and that's when you have to deal with all these anarthas. No, that's when you have to deal with all the aparads. You know, especially the 10 primary ones. And especially the first one is so difficult, which is just Vaishnav Ninda, Vaishnav aparad. You know, dealing with that, it takes a long time to get that straight. It takes a long time to not want to be the best and not want to be the important one and not want to just be the one that everybody loves. It takes a long time to get that impetus or samskar down. But when that one gets down, it's like the doot at the race, you know, doot, 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 doot. Then the gate swings open and then the go-kart just goes woo. once that gets down, once you get past that stage of just needing to be so important, then you can really go fast. And then nishta, you can do nishta bhajan, and then the nishta really becomes deeper and more. The steadiness of your bhajan becomes deeper and deeper and deeper. Not just externally steady, but it becomes mentally steady, and then it becomes emotionally steady. And then when it's emotionally steady, you quickly get this ruchi, or a taste for it, which is like having a taste for a drug. And then there's not even a question of effort involved in the sadhana anymore. The sadhana is effortless and compelling. And then once that's there, that develops into asakti within a short time, within one lifetime, within years. And once you have asakti, then your ahankar gets blown away, and you start to absorb ladini shakti. You start to absorb the shuddha sattva, which is ladini and samvit shakti. You start to absorb the mercy. So from that asakti, you can get bhava. So the answer, my personal answer to your question is no, quite the opposite. It's not that the more you advance, the more difficult it becomes. But people who have only advanced a certain level, it may seem that way, because in the beginning it was really easy to do bhakti because you were just a new bhakta and everything was fun and new, and then you just had to overcome. Then you had to deal with really giving up some attachments. So it seems like it got harder. And then you have to deal, and then you come to see oh God, my heart is really ugly. Then it gets even harder. The beginning stage, the anishta stage, does get progressively harder. But once you get over that hump of not caring whether or not you're the important one anymore, whether or not you're recognized, whether or not you're valued, once you get over that hump, boom, it just gets easier and easier and faster. And then other people may say, well, no, Māyā Devi came to Haridas Thakur, so that's not a difficult challenge. There was no challenge for Haridas Thakur. Oh, Jad Bharat Maharaj isn't this. That's a strange occurrence. That's an unusual occurrence. The thing that usually happens is it's a little bit difficult in the beginning. At the very, very beginning, it gets more and more and more difficult. Then you finally get over this hump, and then you take off.
Leelas, how would you recommend on this day that we might go about meditating on Srimati Radharani this particular verse?
So what's the best way to remember Rādhārānī? It's just like how would you remember Krishna? It's the same thing. First it comes Nam, then Rup, then Guna, then Parikar, and Leela. First take shelter of Radharani's name, which is a little bit misleading. First you have to do Shravana, so you have to hear a little bit about Radharani, otherwise you won't understand what's being named. So like this Katha or Kathas like this are very good, very important. Look in the Cc Chaitanya Charitamrita, look in some great authors for their descriptions of Radharani. Contemplate them. That's the most important thing to do for remembering Radharani correctly. See, the thing is, that's really the thing. Remembering is not really just the thing, but you have to have proper remembrance or correct remembrance. And remembrance is not even really a perfect word translation for it. Smriti is also just thought or contemplation. So you have to have proper contemplation of Radharani. So if that means that first you need Shravana, so Shravana is first. So something like you should hear Shastra about Radhika, and you should hear somebody explain about Radhika, and then you should do kirtan of it. You should also explain that same thing to others, or you should just glorify it, which can be done by Nam Kirtan. So you should do Radharani Nam Kirtan. Radhe Jaya Jaya Madhava Daite, Rādhārānī ki Jai, Maharani ki Jai. Radha Madhava. That's kind of a Krishna thing, but I like how Radharani's name is first. There's a lot of good ones. Oh, Bhaktivinoda Thakur has so many nice ones. Radhika Charana Padama. You look up Bhaktivinoda Thakur, look up his songs about Radharani. He's got really good songs. And so, then you can do Radha Kirtan. After you've done some Shravana about Radharani, then you should do some Kirtan, and then Smarana happens automatically. First, hear about the tattva of Radha. That's most important for anything. It's the same thing. Like if you want to play guitar, how do you do it? First, you got to understand what a guitar is. Then you can get into the details of it. If you want to contemplate Radharani, first to hear the tattva of what she is, which is what we did today. That verse is really important. Rādhā-kṛṣṇa-praṇaya vikṛti lahadini shakti rasmat ekamadmanav api bhuvipura deha bheda gatautal. You got to contemplate the tattvas, and then once you have the tattvas in place, once you know who she is, you can get into thinking, what does she look like? What does her name sound like? What does she look like? What are her qualities? What does she do? But if you don't have the tattva first, then the stuff will be perplexing when you think about what does she look like? What does she sound like? What is her quality? What does she do? So first study the Upanishads, and then go to the Govinda Lilamrita.
At our ashram, if we were to, for example, sing some of the songs about Thakur, glorifying Srimati Radharani, there's a good chance we might get in trouble.
So then you should go someplace else. Go to the park. What's the problem? You can't do this Krishna Bhakti at home. You have to go to the forest. Anybody tries to do Krishna Bhakti in their house, they get in trouble. So you got to go out in the middle of the night.
I have a question also about Radharani. It's a two-part question. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. I would even take it as a three-part question. First, I would say the first part is, isn't it a beautiful symbiotic relationship between the object of consciousness and the subject of consciousness? I think that's kind of the first part of what you said. And then the second part is, maybe a two-part question. And then the second part is, how can there be separation between Radha and Krishna if they're ekatmana, if they're one person? So I really like that first point that you brought. I wanted to talk about that in the beginning. There really is a beautiful symbiosis between the object and subject. When Krishna, as the object of consciousness, Rādhārānī, you see, when you say object, also it sounds like it's sort of inert. Like women say, I'm not an object of, what did they say? I'm not a sex object or something, right? So it's kind of like demeaning to think of yourself as an object. But we're not talking about object in that, because purnam mudachyate, the objects which come from Krishna are themselves subjects, conscious subjects. Because everything which comes from Krishna has Krishna's quality. So Radharani is also a subject. She's not just an object for Krishna, but she's also a subject in and of herself. And the beauty in that is Krishna needs her, because consciousness needs an object. But the object needs consciousness. And you see this. This is the dynamic between masculine and femininity. You can see this anytime you open your eyes. Men are looking for a woman, and women are looking to be looked at. Or they're preparing themselves to be looked at. They want to attract. Women try to attract, and men like to be attracted. So that's a symbiotic relationship. It works for both of them. So that's how it is with Radha and Krishna, the original male and the original female. Krishna wants something to be attracted to enjoy. And Radharani, the supreme object of enjoyment and attraction, wants someone really good. Girls don't just want some Joe Schmo to come and look at them and whistle at them. Girls want some amazing guy to look at them and notice them and appreciate them. So Radharani, the supreme object of consciousness, wants the supreme object of consciousness to like her, to pay attention to her. And that's exactly what the supreme object wants. So there's this beautiful symbiotic relationship between the two. Then you get the second part of the question was that, so how could there be separation between Radha and Krishna if they're one entity? So it's not a existential separation. Like it's not like the separation of two objects. Like if you take, my hand is here and the other hand is here, and then you say they're united, and then you take them apart like this and you say they're separated. That's like an existential separation of objects. That's not really what we're talking about in terms of separation as a component of love. What we're talking about, separation as a component of love is the emotional sense of separation. And you'll find actually that the more intimately you're connected with something, the more intensely and frequently you feel separated from it. I'll give you an example. Is my daughter, she's 3 years old, and I'm crazy in love with her. So even if I go someplace for like 3 days, then I'm thinking about her all the time. Even if I'm out for a day, then I'll feel her absence. Even though we're not technically separated, it's not like there's a break within our relationship that's not going to, reunite. The more intensely you love something or someone, the more minutely you feel any separation. So like if two people are madly in love with each other, they can't even tolerate being on the other side of the room from one another. Where's the physical separation? It's so minute. But the emotional experiences of separation is intense because of the value of the union. So Radharani and Krishna, Radharani feels separation from Krishna the moment Krishna just goes into the forest just walks outside the village. The moment he walks outside his door heading in that direction. So it's not like Krishna has to go someplace far away and stay there. Like, when he went away from Dwarka and he went to Hastinapur and he stayed there for a long time. And the queens and all the citizens of Dwarka were like catatonic. But that's kind of understandable. Like, yeah, Krishna was gone really far away for like a really long time. But the gopis, it's not even like that. The gopis, Krishna can be kissing them and they'll be feeling separation from him because of the value that they place on the unity, because of the value that they place on his company. The intense value, it makes it so precious that there's a sense of not having it even when you have it. If doesn't seem understandable, it is really understandable. You can also think of a junkie. There's nobody in the world that has more drugs than a junkie. They got drugs everywhere. But there's nobody in the world that feels like they don't have enough drugs than a junkie. So because they're totally wrapped up in that drug. Even though it's all around them constantly, they always think that they don't have enough. So that's the way it works. That's the way attachment works. Attachment works by creating a sense of not having it. So that's the intensity there. And then there's just little dramas. That's love isn't boring. It's not boring. So it has to have some kind of a drama. It's not boring either. It's not like Radharani and Krishna are just constantly hugging. She's going to create like some distance to make it. Sometimes there'll be distance. There has to be all kinds of play to increase the value of the object, of the main commodity. The main commodity, right? The value has to be increased, and you don't just do that by flooding the market. The main commodity, there has to be supply and demand. So you got to increase the demand and keep the supply in check. So that's what the gopis are expert at. And that's why the cowherd boys exist. And that's why the parents exist. That's their real service. Their real service is to create a little bit of distance to increase the value of those 2 times a day when Krishna and Radharani can be together without interruption.
But he says, please comment on this. Radha, being the embodiment of Vladini Shakti, is the soul, and he puts soul in capital letters, source of his pleasure.
All right, so the question, Radharani is the sole source of Krishna's pleasure. So how does this affect our approach to serving Krishna, right? You got it. Bingo, that's the answer. Radharani is the sole source of... Prabhupada said that all the time. Almost whenever he would talk about Radharani. That would be his main point, right? She's the best She's the best servant of Krishna, so we should serve her. Krishna wants the object of conscious. He wants something worthy of being conscious. If you're conscious, you want some reason to be conscious, something worth being conscious of. So Radharani exists. And then Radharani is also a fountainhead of energies. And anytime Krishna expands, she also expands, and then she has her own expansions as well. So there's all kinds of things which are emanating through her or from her, including all of us. You know, technically speaking, we're not directly manifest from Radharani specifically. But if you just pull it out a little bit to its logical conclusion, we are ultimately manifestations of Radharani because she's Purna Shakti. So any Shakti has its root in her. So even if you say, well, the Atma is a spark from Paramatma, well, what is Paramatma? Paramatma is an expansion of Vishnu. What is Vishnu? Vishnu is an expansion of Narayan. What's Narayan? Narayan is an expansion of Krishna. And every time Krishna expands, his energy expands with him. So Radharani is accompanying each one. So by the time he gets to be Paramatma, Radhika is all the individual Atmas. So, you know, technically you can say, like, no, we're Paramatma Shakti, but actually what is Paramatma Shakti? So ultimately it's Radharani's Purna Shakti. So that's what we are. We're also the thing which Krishna wants to experience. We're part of that thing that Krishna wants to experience. Krishna is the experiencer, he's the seer. So he manifests things to be seen. And we're part of that picture that he's manifest. We're part of that. But we are like a decoration of that part. Because we're jiva, we're fairly well removed. We're like small atmas. So we're fairly well removed from the center of the tornado. But, you know, we're some kind of a decorative part of the picture that is Radharani. Our objective is going to be to connect ourselves to Radharani. But it doesn't mean that you have to become a gopi, or that, you know, you can become a flower. You could become a peacock. You could become a swan. What to speak of, you could become a friend of Radharani's brother, or an uncle, a friend of her uncle. You know, there's millions of ways to decorate the picture. It's not necessarily that you have to be the one who knows how to do her hair. You know, there's so many ways. It's not just like hackneyed or stereotyped. That means that you have to be a gopi.
I never would say that Radharani is the cake and we're like the sprinkles on the cake.
I love that.
Makes the cake a little pretty.
Yeah, I love that.
So this same devotee then has two more comments. I read you one already in separation. Why doesn't Radha just go to visit Krishna in Mathura? Okay.
That was another point of your thing. Like, how can Krishna be outside of Vrindavan, right? Well, Krishna's not. He doesn't go outside of Vrindavan because Vrindavan is him. It's his swarup. Vrindavan is just like Krishna has a form with 2 legs and 2 arms and 2 eyes. So he also, this river, the Jamuna River and the bank and the trees and the flowers is also part of his form. He's inseparable from it. He exists in Vrindavan. Dhamna svena sada nirasta kuhakam satyam param dhimahi. Dhamna svena sada. He's always within his own dham. He can't be outside of his own dham. That's the definition of dham. So the idea that he goes outside of the dham is an idea. And that it's just an idea. In fact, the idea is actually that he even comes from outside the dham. As far as the idea is that he comes from Mathura, and he's somebody else's son. So not only is there an idea that he's going to leave Vrindavan, but the idea is that he didn't even come from Vrindavan in the first place, all of which is existentially false. But the idea is important to the emotions. So that's the way that he manifests himself, you know. He manifests himself with the sense that I come from someplace else, but I'm here to visit you. So take advantage of the time. and I'm going to go someplace else pretty soon, so this is precious time. It would be so boring if it was just like, yeah, I'm here forever. This is my eternal abode. Don't worry about it. You could sleep late. It's not like that. The spiritual existence can't be boring. That's one thing it definitely can't be. It can't be boring. So he manifested in such a way that it's extremely exciting and it's thrilling and it's like dangerous. It's extremely dangerous Vrindavan Dham, not just this local Vrindavan Dham, but even the real Vrindavan Dham. It's just such a dangerous, wild, crazy place that makes it so thrilling and adventurous. So he doesn't actually leave it, but he might hide. He might hide. So, and then when it comes to when it manifests itself in the earthly plane of existence, then it can seem like he actually does come from outside Vrindavan, and then he actually does leave it at a certain point. So it's just giving shape to the idea. I think the class may have to end, because I think my 3-year-old daughter may be on the loose.